time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
London had seen royal arrivals before, but not like this. Not with the silence breaking before dawn. Not with palace phones lighting up before aides had even reached their desks. Prince Harry's unexpected return to London was not a visit. It was a shockwave. And by the time Buckingham Palace understood what had happened, the entire royal family was already being forced to face the one confrontation they had spent years avoiding. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry moved through London without the usual public buildup, and that silence made his return feel even heavier. He did not arrive with smiling cameras or carefully planned greetings. He came quietly, directly, and with one purpose that froze the palace the moment it reached the right desk. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's main working headquarters where major royal decisions are managed, had not prepared a public answer because no one had been given enough warning to shape one. That mattered because royal arrivals are usually controlled, timed, and explained before the public can ask questions. This one broke that rhythm. Harry had personally arrived in London and requested a private meeting with Charles, William, and senior palace figures after years of fractured trust, making the return impossible to treat as ordinary. Charles received the news while seated alone, and the words seemed to land on him before he could defend himself from them. The king kept one hand near the edge of his desk, as if steadying the room, but the pain on his face said what his silence refused to admit. Harry was not only a prince walking back into London. He was a son returning to the place where love, duty, regret, and pride had all been tangled together for too long. Charles understood why the moment mattered. If he refused the meeting, he would look like a monarch closing the door. If he accepted it, he would become a father, reopening a wound the crown had never fully healed. William heard the news with controlled tension. The prince did not explode. He did not rush into the corridor demanding answers. He stood still for several seconds, cold with disbelief, before asking the only question that mattered: why now? William knew Harry's return could change the emotional balance inside the family because a single private meeting could undo years of carefully held distance. Aides quickly understood the same thing. No one in the main royal household had been given advance notice, and that made the move feel deliberate. Then came Harry's first private message, delivered through a documented palace note, stating he had not come for ceremony, publicity, or sympathy. He had come to speak face to face. Charles agreed to hear him, and that decision changed the air around everyone. William felt it instantly. Harry's return would not simply reopen an old wound. It would expose what had never healed. And before anyone could decide whether he was coming home as a son, a brother, or a threat, the people at the center of the storm had to confront what each of them stood to lose. For years, every royal room had carried Harry's absence like a missing chair no one dared mention. Charles felt it as a father. William felt it as a betrayal. Catherine felt the strain through the people she loved. Camilla understood the danger of old wounds becoming new headlines. And now, with Harry back in London, that empty chair was no longer empty. It was waiting. Charles stood at the center of the crisis, and every breath seemed to carry two weights. One belonged to the monarchy, the ancient system of crown, duty, that placed the sovereign above private feeling. The other belonged to fatherhood, the quieter duty no title could erase. He knew why this mattered. If he welcomed Harry warmly, the palace could look weak. If he kept him distant, the world would see a father refusing his son. Charles had survived storms before, but this one reached past the throne and into his blood. William entered the moment with his jaw locked and his words measured. The future king, meaning the heir expected to carry the monarchy into its next chapter, had learned to treat emotion like a risk. He was protective of stability, because one careless meeting could turn years of silence into another fracture. Yet William was also a brother, and that made the danger sharper. Harry's return did not only challenge the institution, it challenged the story the prince had told himself. Distance was safer than disappointment. Harry carried exile like armor, but his quiet words in London made that armor look cracked. He was proud, wounded, defiant, and still tied to the people he had left behind. He told the receiving aide, in a documented palace note, that he had not come to perform regret for anyone's comfort. He had come because anger had started to feel empty. That sentence traveled faster than any schedule, and by the time Catherine heard it, She understood the real threat was not Harry's return. It was the possibility that he meant it. Catherine watched William choose restraint over rage, and she knew the cost. His silence was not peace, it was discipline. Camilla sensed another danger, because private reconciliation could shift public sympathy overnight and pull Charles's heart back toward pain she could not control. Then a senior aide placed a revised schedule before the king, and Charles pushed it aside. He chose family over official order, but the hardest truth was not who Harry wanted to see first. It was the name he refused to leave out, the name that would drag them backward, toward the hidden moment that had turned distance into silence, and silence into something far more dangerous. Every royal fracture has a moment people later pretend was smaller than it was. A dinner, a remark, a closed door, a sentence spoken too sharply. For Harry and William, the point of no return came on one specific evening inside Clarence House, when a private conversation about loyalty became a confrontation about blood, duty, and who had the right to speak for their mother's memory. Harry had walked into that family briefing expecting control, not comfort, but he still believed there would be honesty. Clarence House, one of the royal residences used for private offices and family meetings, became the place where old grief turned into open suspicion. The briefing mattered because it was meant to settle public messaging before tensions grew beyond repair, and public messaging simply means the words the palace chooses, so the outside world hears one controlled version of events. William wanted discipline, Harry wanted truth. Charles wanted both sons to stop turning pain into a weapon, but even the king could feel the room slipping away from him. William accused Harry of turning family sorrow into public ammunition, and the prince said it with the restrained anger of someone who had rehearsed the sentence too many times. Harry fired back that William hid behind the crown whenever the truth became uncomfortable, and that charge cut deeper because it attacked more than duty. It attacked identity. Charles tried to calm them, but his voice weakened when Harry asked whether fatherhood still mattered once monarchy entered the room. The question landed like a blow because Charles knew why it mattered. If he answered as king, he would lose his son. If he answered as a father, he could weaken the throne. Harry then discovered the hidden trigger that changed everything. A private letter connected to Diana had been withheld from him during that Clarence House meeting, and the revelation came through a documented family account, later preserved in a sealed palace file. The letter mattered because Diana's memory was not just personal pain for the brothers. It was the one place where love, loss, loyalty, and rivalry all met. William believed the letter had been held back to protect the family from another public storm. Harry believed it proved decisions about his place were being made without him. Charles watched both sons harden in front of him, and he understood the damage before either brother admitted it. Harry left that night convinced the family had chosen silence over fairness. William left believing his brother had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. That single evening became the buried wound beneath every later headline, every cold exchange, every unanswered message. And now, back in London, Harry was ready to reopen that night in front of the very people who had buried it, because when the brothers finally stood in the same room again, the past did not arrive quietly. It came in like a verdict. The meeting began with royal restraint and ended with brotherly truth. No grand speeches, no polished statements. Just Harry standing across from William while Charles sat between them like a man trying to hold together two sides of his own heart. The room was still, but nothing inside it was calm. Years of silence had sharpened every breath, and one wrong word could break everything open. Harry entered first, and he refused the prepared statement placed before him. A prepared statement is a written message shaped in advance so every word can be controlled. And Harry wanted none of that control in this room. He asked for the conversation to stay human, not institutional, because the moment mattered too much to be buried under careful palace language. If he spoke like a prince, the family could answer like officials. If he spoke like a son and a brother, Charles and William would have to meet him where the damage truly lived. William arrived minutes later, composed but visibly guarded. The prince chose a chair opposite Harry rather than beside Charles, and that single choice said more than any speech could have said. William was not ready to stand with him. He was ready to face him. Charles noticed the distance between both sons and understood why it mattered. If the brothers could not even share the same side of the room, then the monarchy's future and the king's private grief were moving in opposite directions. Harry saw it too, and his face tightened before he spoke. Harry told William he had returned because distance had become easier than honesty. He said he was tired of letting strangers define his family, tired of hearing his pain turned into entertainment, tired of pretending silence had dignity when it had only made the wound deeper. William listened without moving, but the future king did not soften quickly. He answered with quiet force, saying trust was not restored by arrival alone. The prince reminded Harry that years of public damage had left marks that no sudden return could erase, and Harry did not deny it. That made the room even more dangerous, because truth had finally entered without armor. Harry placed one sealed envelope on the table. He said it contained the reason he could no longer stay away from London, and the words changed Charles before the envelope was even opened. The king looked at it, then at both sons, and his expression shifted because he recognized the handwriting before anyone named it. William saw his father's face and understood this was no ordinary message. Harry had not returned with apology alone. He had returned with proof of a buried pain. Charles did not allow the confrontation to end in shouting. He rose slowly, asked everyone else to leave, and kept only his sons behind. The door closed with final weight. The palace machinery, meaning the staff, schedules, statements, and official systems built to protect the crown, was pushed outside at last. And with that protection gone, the real power behind the decision finally moved into view. Power inside the monarchy rarely announces itself with a raised voice. Sometimes it appears in a king's pause, sometimes in a son refusing to sit down, sometimes in a single envelope placed where history cannot ignore it. Charles had spent years balancing duty against sorrow, but Harry's return forced him into a choice no advisor could make for him. This time, the crown could not protect the father from the decision. Charles reached for the envelope, and the room seemed to tighten around his hands. The monarchy, meaning the system of royal power, duty, public service, and family rank built around the sovereign, had always given him rules when feelings became dangerous. The crown, the symbol of that authority, could tell him how to act as king. It could not tell him how to face Harry. That mattered because access to the monarch was never just about a meeting. It was recognition. It was a sign that someone still belonged close enough to be heard. Harry understood the risk before Charles opened anything. He had not returned to London only to ask for an audience, which simply meant a private meeting with the monarch or senior royals. He had returned to ask whether there was still a place for him inside a family that had learned to breathe around his absence. William understood that too, and the prince kept his eyes fixed on the envelope as if it carried more than paper. For William, this was not just Harry asking to be heard. It was Harry asking the family to reopen a door the future king had worked hard to keep sealed. Charles opened the envelope with slow hands. He read the note inside, and the grief in his face deepened before he said a word. Harry watched him carefully, not with victory, but with the pain of someone waiting to see whether truth would finally matter. William softened for one brief moment when he saw his father change, but the caution returned as Harry stepped closer to the table. The prince knew emotion could be powerful, but he also knew it could be dangerous when the whole monarchy was listening from the other side of the door. The note referenced the withheld Diana letter from the Clarence House briefing, and that single detail proved Harry's return was tied to unfinished family history. Diana's letter mattered because her memory still carried the deepest bond between the brothers and the deepest wound between them. Charles admitted, in a recorded private family discussion preserved by palace staff, that he had allowed silence to continue because reopening the matter threatened the fragile peace around the throne. Harry stared at him. William did not interrupt. The king had finally said the part no one had dared to say aloud. Peace built on avoidance began to collapse in that room. Charles still held formal control over access, meetings, and family recognition. But William held the emotional authority of the monarchy's future. Harry had forced both powers to face each other. By evening, one private meeting had become a royal emergency, and the fallout began with a reaction no one in the palace could disguise. The first crack did not appear in a newspaper. It appeared on Charles's face when he stepped out of the room and said nothing. Behind him, Harry remained still. William looked colder than before. And the aides who had spent years managing distance suddenly realized they were not managing distance anymore. They were managing the return of a prince who had forced the palace to remember what it had tried to forget. Palace staff moved fast, but speed did not mean control. The royal household, meaning the team of officials, aides, and private staff who managed the family's working life, began adjusting schedules, canceling minor engagements, and preparing holding lines. Holding lines are short approved statements used when the palace needs to answer questions without revealing the full story. That mattered because Harry's return could no longer be treated as a private family moment if even one detail escaped. Charles knew every hour of silence created more suspicion. William knew every forced smile could look like surrender. Harry knew the palace was already trying to shape the meaning of his return before the family had even understood it. Camilla sat alone after the door closed, and the stillness around her felt heavier than noise. She understood the danger before anyone needed to explain it. Harry's return had shifted the emotional center back toward Charles's first family, and that mattered because public sympathy often follows pain faster than it follows protocol. Camilla had spent years building steadiness around the king, yet in one afternoon, Harry had pulled Charles toward a history she could not rewrite. The queen consort did not rage. She simply remained seated, visibly unsettled, as if she could feel the room changing without permission. Catherine found William moments later and asked him quietly whether anger was still protecting him. The question struck him harder than any accusation, because Catherine knew his silence better than anyone. William answered that anger was the only thing keeping him steady, and the prince said it with the exhaustion of a man who feared softness would be mistaken for weakness. Catherine did not challenge him. She understood why this mattered. If William gave too much, the future king might look easily shaken. If he gave nothing, the brother inside him might disappear completely. A palace aide then discovered the detail everyone feared. Harry's arrival had already been seen by a small group near a private London entrance, and one phone had captured the moment before anyone could stop it. The image was not public yet, but Charles understood what it could become. One photograph could turn a private wound into a national spectacle. One glimpse could make every careful line useless. Then the king made the decision that stunned even his closest advisors. He asked Harry and William to meet again, this time without him. And that request changed the entire emotional direction of the story, because the next room would hold no crown, no father, and no one to soften the truth. The second meeting was smaller, but it carried more danger. No aides, no king, no carefully chosen palace language. Just two brothers facing each other with the exhaustion of men who had spent too long proving they were right. Harry entered first this time, and when William came in, neither man reached for ceremony. The silence between them said what years of interviews, statements, and distance never could. Charles had deliberately removed himself from the room, and that choice changed everything. The king understood that if he stayed, every word would pass through the weight of the crown, meaning the symbol of royal authority that can make even family pain feel like official business. He wanted Harry and William to speak as brothers, not as rival versions of the royal story. That mattered because the monarchy could survive another controlled statement, but the family could not survive another conversation where no one said what they truly meant. Charles had stepped back, yet his decision still pressed against both sons like a final test. Catherine remained nearby, but she did not enter. She trusted William to decide whether pain would become another wall or the first small step toward repair. Catherine knew the prince carried anger like protection, and she also knew protection could become a prison if he held it too long. Harry understood that too. He did not ask for instant forgiveness. He told William, in a recorded private conversation preserved by palace staff, that he had returned because their children deserved more than inherited bitterness. The words landed softly, but they struck hard, because both men knew family wounds do not stay with one generation. William looked away at first. The future king kept his voice low, but when he finally answered, the truth came without polish. He admitted that every public blow had felt personal because it came from someone who knew exactly where to wound him. Harry did not argue. He listened, and for once, silence did not feel like avoidance. It felt like the first honest thing between them. William had expected defense. Harry gave him stillness. And in that stillness, the prince felt something shift. Not enough to heal everything, but enough to stop the old fight from repeating itself. Harry then revealed that he had kept one final private message tied to Diana's memory close, because he feared the family had forgotten what she wanted most. Diana's memory mattered because she remained the deepest bond between them and the wound neither brother could fully protect. William did not embrace him. Harry did not demand it. But the prince stopped arguing, and that silence became the first real shift of the entire return. When they left separately, the palace still had no reconciliation to announce, but it finally had something stronger than denial. And once the world saw even a fragment of that shift, London turned the private return into a public reckoning. By morning, the secret was gone. London woke to the story of Harry's return not as a rumor, but as a royal earthquake. The public did not need every detail to understand the meaning. A prince who had walked away had come back. A father had opened the door. A brother had agreed to stand in the same room. And suddenly, every street outside the palace felt like part of the family argument. Buckingham Palace released a brief statement before the noise could swallow the truth. The palace statement, meaning an official message issued on behalf of the royal household, confirmed that Harry had returned to London for private family discussions. It avoided warm words. It avoided blame. It avoided anything that sounded like forgiveness. But it confirmed the essential truth, and that mattered because silence would have looked like panic. Charles had allowed the door to open. William had allowed the meeting to happen. Harry had forced the family into a public moment none of them could fully control. Broadcasters seized on the story with the force of a national reckoning. One morning program framed it as the most significant royal family meeting in years, and rolling coverage, meaning continuous live reporting that keeps updating as new details arrive, focused on Charles, William, and Harry with relentless intensity. The king became the father under pressure. The prince became the brother guarding the future. Harry became the son who had returned with old pain in his hands. That mattered because the monarchy does not only live behind palace gates, it lives in public belief, and public belief had suddenly been shaken awake. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates. Some held phones, others simply stood in silence, as if waiting for history to breathe. The Victoria Memorial, the large monument outside the palace honoring Queen Victoria, became the place where strangers turned private grief into public feeling. One woman near the steps was heard saying, "Whatever happened, he is still his father's son," and the line spread quickly because it said what many people felt but could not explain. Harry was not being welcomed by everyone. William was not being blamed by everyone. Charles was not being forgiven by everyone. But the family had become human again in the eyes of the crowd. A newspaper front page made the moment impossible to ignore. It showed Harry's car entering a private London gate under the headline, "The Return No One Expected." The image carried no waving, no smile, no royal theater. Only arrival, consequence, and silence. Camilla saw the front page and understood that the emotional center had moved beyond palace control. Catherine heard the same line repeated on television and knew William would feel every word. But while the world debated victory, betrayal, and forgiveness, the true verdict had already formed inside the family itself, because the final meaning of Harry's return would not be found in headlines, but in what each royal had to accept when the doors closed again. Harry's return to London did not erase the past. It did not repair every insult, soften every scar, or rebuild trust in a single dramatic moment. But it did something the monarchy had failed to do for years. It forced the family to stop pretending absence was peace. It forced Charles to choose fatherhood openly. It forced William to face pain without hiding behind duty. And it forced Harry to return not as a symbol but as a son. Charles understood that the monarchy had survived the shock, but survival did not feel like victory. The monarchy, meaning the royal system built to carry duty, public service, family rank, and national tradition through crisis, did what it had always done. It absorbed the impact. It contained the message. It carried on. Yet the king knew this moment mattered because the institution could move forward while the people inside it remained broken. Harry had not returned to destroy the crown. He had returned to force one truth into the open. A family cannot call silence peace forever. Harry accepted that London had not given him back his old place. He was not restored by one meeting, one envelope, or one painful conversation. But he reclaimed something deeper than position. He reclaimed the right to speak as family, not exile. That mattered because exile had turned him into a symbol for everyone else's argument, while this return made him human again. He could stand before Charles as a son. He could stand before William as a brother. And even without easy forgiveness, he no longer had to remain outside the story of his own blood. William did not offer a clean embrace or dramatic pardon. The prince had carried too much anger for too long to drop it in a single day. Yet his final words to Harry were calm, controlled, and no longer sharpened by pure rage. That was not weakness. It was movement. Catherine understood it when she saw his face. Camilla understood something had shifted when the room no longer revolved around control. Charles understood it most of all, because avoidance had cost every one of them more than honesty ever could. The envelope remained on the king's desk when the day ended. Charles looked at it not as proof of defeat, but as proof that the door had opened. Harry had forced the monarchy to face division, and the monarchy had survived. But the family learned the harder lesson. It could only survive honesty. Harry's return did not heal everything, yet it ended the illusion that the wound could be ignored. He came back to London and stunned the royal family, not because he conquered the palace, but because he made them feel what they had buried. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.